Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 20th. Today we are reading together in Exodus chapter 7, which is going to kick off the cycle of the plagues against Egypt. I'm really excited to read through these texts with you over this next week. Over the next 6 days, we're going to read through, I think, actually part of the actual Exodus. We're going to read through all the plagues. We're going to read about the final plague, the institution of the Passover, and some of the details concerning the deliverance of Israel from Egypt. It looks to be a great read together, and I'm excited to do it together with you. Let me get the text of Exodus chapter 7 up on the screen for us, and we will get to reading here in Exodus chapter 7. Again, another pretty unfortunate chapter break. Might have been a little better to back it up a few verses. Actually, we'll do that. We'll just start reading up here in verse 28, because we have the repeat in 28 of what was spoken, or what is written in chapter 6 and verses 12 and 13. And then it's repeated here after the genealogy of Aaron, that on the day, this is Exodus 6 and verse 28. On the day the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord, I am Yahweh. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I'm telling you. But Moses replied in Yahweh's presence, since I am such a poor speaker, how will Pharaoh listen to me? So here is the continuation. Here's the answer of Yahweh to Moses' question. See, I made you like God to Pharaoh. This is Exodus 7, verse number 1. And Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet, will be your mouthpiece, your spokesman. You must say whatever I command you. And Aaron, your brother, must declare it to Pharaoh so that he will let the Israelites go from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not listen to you, but I will put my hand into Egypt and bring the military divisions of my people, the Israelites, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgments. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the Israelites from among them. So Moses and Aaron did this. They did just as Yahweh commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh tells you, perform a miracle, tell Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh. It will become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went in to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord had commanded. I don't know how I missed these highlights earlier. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a serpent. But when Pharaoh called the wise men and sorcerers, the magicians of Egypt, they also did the same thing by their occult practices. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a serpent. But Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. However, Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not listen to them as the Lord had said. Then Yahweh said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, and when you see him walking out to the water, stand ready to meet him by the bank of the Nile. Take in your hand the staff that turned into a snake, and tell him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to tell you, let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness. But so far you have not listened. This is what Yahweh says. Here is how you will know that I am Yahweh. Watch, I'm about to strike the Nile, or the water in the Nile, with the staff in my hand, and it will turn to blood. The fish in the Nile will die, the river will stink, and the Egyptians will be unable to drink water from it. So Yahweh said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, canals, ponds, and all their water reservoirs, and they will become blood. There will be blood throughout the land of Egypt, even in the wooden and stone containers. Moses and Aaron did just as Yahweh had commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and his officials, he raised the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile was turned to blood. The fish in the Nile died. The river smelled so bad, the Egyptians could not drink water from it. There was blood throughout the land of Egypt. So the magicians of Egypt did the same thing by their occult practices. So Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen to them, as Yahweh had said. Pharaoh turned around, went into his palace, and didn't take even this to heart. All the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink because they could not drink the water from the river. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. And this is Genesis chapter 7. All right, the exciting stuff is taking place now. The preparation is done. It's time for Moses and Aaron now to go stand up to the enemy, to go stand up to Pharaoh. Let's make sure that we recognize again that this battle that's taking place, or I guess this war and these battles of these plagues and such that are taking place, it is Pharaoh and all of the paganism that he represents, all the rebelliousness that he represents against Yahweh. Yahweh is the one who is stretching out his mighty arm in order to accomplish these things. It's not Moses and Aaron, they're just the tools, but it is God and his power that is accomplishing what is taking place. So with that in mind, whenever Moses says, I'm kind of a poor speaker, how will Pharaoh listen to me? Well, Yahweh says, well, he's not going to listen to you. He's going to listen to Aaron. Aaron's going to be your prophet. He's going to be the spokesman for you and what you are going to accomplish. Tell Aaron, whenever you go, tell him to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. But recognize, and this is what the Lord says, that I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply the signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Again, that phrase, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, is one that has caused a lot of controversy. There's no telling how much ink has been spilled discussing what this means. But I don't think there's really much difficulty in understanding it. What the Lord was going to do was going to harden Pharaoh's heart. The Lord was going to put before Pharaoh a choice. You can either respect me and obey my commands and let the people go, or you can choose to harden your heart and stand against me and rebel against me. He gave Pharaoh the choice, and Pharaoh made his choice. I like what one writer said. One writer said that the same sun that melts the ice also hardens the clay. It all depends upon the material that you are dealing with. If Pharaoh's heart would have been ice, it would have melted and would have done as the Lord said. But instead, his heart was made of clay, and it was hardened by Yahweh's actions. Yet Yahweh knew this, and he was going to use this to his advantage. He was going to show even more so just how powerful he was, or just how powerful he is. And he is going to show his ability to absolutely confound and overcome whatever power Egypt thought she had. I appreciate very much verse number 5. After he talks about in verse 4 or verses 3 and 4, I'm going to multiply the signs and wonders. I'll put my hand in Egypt to bring the military divisions out by great acts of judgment. And through all of this, he says, the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand against Egypt to bring the Israelites from among them. It is these incredible, miraculous deeds that Yahweh is going to accomplish. He's going to carry out through the means of Moses and Aaron. That is going to be absolute proof that he is the almighty, powerful God. And we're going to see that throughout this story. So Moses and Aaron do what they're told. They go to Pharaoh. And I want to note real fast, too, that Moses was kind of old. Moses was 80 years old. Aaron was 83 years old. So that kind of answers a little bit of whether or not Aaron even knew he had a brother. Well, he was older than Moses, so yes, he did. But they're kind of old at this point. I mean, obviously 80 and 83 to us is a lot different than their ages, since they both lived, I think Moses lived to 120, 130, something of that nature. So they've been around for minutes. But again, it's not about them. It's about God who is supplying them strength. They go before Pharaoh and they say, hey, let my people go. Pharaoh doesn't do it. He says to perform a miracle. So Aaron throws the staff on the ground. It turns into a serpent. Why a serpent? Well, we've seen this previously with God interacting with Moses, but a serpent is appropriate here because Egypt's power was symbolized by serpents. If you think about Pharaoh, some of the pictures that we have, they have those head coverings, the helmets almost that have the big cobra on top of it. It was a symbol of their power. So Aaron throws his staff on the ground, it becomes a serpent. But then Pharaoh makes his move, and he tries to initiate a show of force here by calling his magicians and sorcerers and wise men here, and they're having a power struggle at this point. They're going to see who's better. And guess what? They're able to do the same thing. There's nothing within this text that tells me this was some kind of trick. I fully believe that they performed something of a miraculous sort here. It says they did so by their occult practices, by demonology and that type of thing. We have to believe demons are real and they have power. That is certainly a theme all throughout Scripture. I think that's what I personally think that's what's going on here. That there were wicked spiritual forces that enabled them to do this here in this moment. But that still doesn't mean that they have any true power against God. And that's exemplified by the fact that Aaron's snake swallows them up. Clearly, plain as day, God's power is greater than them, even if they can match it. I like what one writer says, even this is counterfeit power. And even if it's real power, it is not lasting power, because God's power is greater. And God will not be one-upped by anyone or anything. Fortunately, Pharaoh's heart was hard. He did not listen to them, and this happened just as Yahweh had said. So now Yahweh says to Moses, what I told you is reality. Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refused to let the people go. So in the morning, whenever you go to Pharaoh, whenever you're meeting him at the bank of the Nile, I want you to take in your hand the staff that you turn into a snake. And then you're going to tell him that Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to tell you, let my people go so that they may worship me in the wilderness. But so far you have not listened. So this is what Yahweh says. This is how you will know. Again, the emphasis here is on how they will know that he is Yahweh. There is evidence here. There are signs, miraculous, powerful signs of strength that God is going to perform. It's part of the purpose of the plagues, is to give absolute evidence in the strength of Yahweh. So this is what he's going to do. He says, watch, I'm about to strike the water in the Nile with a staff in my hand, and it will turn to blood. The fish in the Nile will die. The river will stink. The Egyptians will be unable to drink it. The Nile River, was the absolute source of Egypt's vitality. It was the source of life. And here, God is going to turn their lifeline into literal blood. Now, they also saw the river as a deity. The deity is called Hapi or Hapi, Hapi. Here, God is making an assault against their deity. Again, this is God against rebellious forces. So that takes place here. But then you might be thinking, well, if they do all that, then aren't they going to harm the Jews in this scene? They're going to suffer from this as well. Well, except for the fact that we read in verse number 19, Yahweh says to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers. And I'm inserting this here, their canals, their ponds, and all their water reservoirs. And they will become blood. There will be blood throughout the land of Egypt, even in the wooden and stone containers. So here it seems as if the water that's being targeted is the water belonging to the Egyptians. They are the ones that God has to convince. So here, the water, the Nile, turns on Egypt. Really, it's chapter 1 being turned on its head. Because remember, there, Pharaoh used the Nile as a tool against the Egyptian sons, or against the sons of the Israelites. Well, now God is going to use it against them. So Moses and Aaron, verse 20, did just as Yahweh had commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh, they raised the staff, and the water and all of it turned to blood. The fish did die, just as he said. The river did stink, just as he said. And the Egyptians could not drink the water, just as they said. There was blood throughout the land of Egypt. Here's the thing, verse 22 again. The magicians, the magicians of, I'm going to start calling them that now. That's who they're the magicians. The magicians of Egypt did the same thing by their occult practices. Again, I have no reason to believe that this was just some parlor trick. I tend to believe this was real. They used those forces of evil and rebelling against God, that they were at play here as well. Remember, that's the struggle here. There's a struggle between Yahweh and everything that is rebelling against him, whether it be material and earthly like Pharaoh, or whether it be the spiritual forces that would be behind him. I believe that's what's going on here in this text. I associate a lot with what we see like in text of Ephesians chapter 6 and stuff. This is spiritual warfare here. This is God fighting for his people. And we see the struggle here between what God is doing and what Pharaoh and the magicians of his court are doing. Pharaoh wouldn't listen, though. His heart was hardened. Pharaoh turned around, went back into his palace, and didn't even take this to heart. Why? Because hard hearts don't receive correction. Hard hearts don't listen. All the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink because they could not drink the water from the river. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. Game on. The battle is beginning. This war between God and everything that is Egypt is taking place now. And Yahweh, through these mighty acts, through this strong power, through this these mighty feats of strength, he is going to bring Egypt to her knees and show that even Almighty Egypt cannot stand up against Yahweh, the God of Israel. Again, I'm excited to continue to read through these plagues with you and learn a little bit more about some of the nuances of the text, some of the details here, and really get down to focusing on this reality that it is God versus rebellion. It's God versus Pharaoh, God versus everything that supports him and is behind him. God is showing that there's nothing at all that can stand up against him. Looking forward to reading more with you tomorrow as we look at the second plague, which is the frogs, the third plague, which is the gnats, and then the fourth plague, which is the swarm of flies. We'll look at that tomorrow in Exodus chapter 8. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. In case you weren't made aware, you didn't see the Facebook post, Jonah Lambert, Emma Wade's grandson, was baptized yesterday into Christ. What a wonderful thing that was. We certainly rejoice with him and look forward to growing together with him in faith together. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone. Take care and God bless.